How are you? Welcome to Critical Moves of Telesur. A new era has begun in Iraq after the al-Khadimi sworn as prime minister. In what context does this reorganization of the political establishment have become? How do the chips move? And what are the areas that are still pending? For example, the U.S. troops that have been requested to leave the U.S. troops, this parliamentary request of the Arab country after the facts that happened in January. Let's analyze this. Let's begin. The president that is based on al-Khadimi, who was sworn in May 6th after 6 months of vacancy. Let's listen what are the lines that he has established for his new government. Let's also listen to the reactions. It will be a government at the service of the people, a government that serves the people with facts. Everybody, without an exception, will be responsible. The government will always be in the first line of defense to protect the Iraqis from the damage of coronavirus. We will do everything in our hands and all of the relations we have to protect Iraq and to stop this pandemic. All of the hard, heavy, and lightweight weapons are of exclusive use of the government. We will not let any party, external or internal, to affect our government. The Iraqi people is the bedrock of civilization. We inform the security organisms that all of the people who were detained in the protest, and we ask them to liberate all of those who had condemned for secondary charges, except for those who have been charged of bloodshed. The approval of the new president and the division, solving the division of the government is something good, but we don't think there's going to be a significant change, especially because of the coronavirus crisis. This government that comes of an agreement, this government has essential duties, for example, to go through with all of the elections and to put a date for anticipated elections. Let's locate this country that we are going to be focusing on today. Iraq, objective of many countries want. Originally called as Mesopotamia, that is called because of that, because it's in 2 rivers, and now it's officially the Republic of Iraq. It's in the southeast of Asia, and it takes most of the Zagros mountain chain. It has also it is surrounded by countries with Turkey, Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Syria, with a surface of 438,317 square kilometers, and the capital city is Baghdad. Throughout history, Iraq has been the center of empires like the Sumerians, Arcadia, Babylon, Mongol, Ottoman, and Britain. In this country, there are several religions. For example, Islam, Sunni, Shiite, and Christian. Iraq has a very small coastal region, but it is very well desired because of the oil they have. They have among the biggest reserves of oil. It's also part of OPEC. And in fact, it was in Baghdad where this organism began. Iraq also has natural gas, phosphate, and sulfur. You may recall that the Trump administration has announced to bring back their troops from the Middle East. It is expected there's going to be a negotiation table in this respect. But let's see how this process has been going on up until now. On January 3rd of this year, Qasem Soleimani was assassinated along with another 11 people. This is the Lieutenant al-Mudis during an attempt of the United States on a Baghdad. 3 days later, there was a resolution of Baghdad saying that they want all of the U.S. Army to go out. And then the Secretary of State of Iraq asked the Secretary of State of the U.S. to apply this parliamentary rule by which this resolution, the U.S. forces had gone into Iraq and the non-manned airplane had been flying over the Iraqi territory, which is a violation of the bilateral agreements. Iraq was emphatic in rejecting all of these bridges of sovereignty. And they also wanted for them to accept some attack of United States on the country. At the beginning, United States did not want to evacuate their troops. However, they were ready to do so in case they were going to be forced. On March 17, the U.S. abandoned the U.S. military base. After 10 days, the police, led by the United States in a base in Al-Qayyad, they complemented the withdrawal from the space that was Irkutsk. According to the index of these countries, Iraq is one of the 11th country most unstable of the world, and there is a coalition led by the United States and the UK, and there are many U.S. troops in the Middle East. In the case of Iraq, there are many reduced bases. Let's begin with checking the digital websites. For example, Mediterranean newspaper says on May 9th, it says, the protests are back to Iraq after the new government has taken office. They have taken to the streets after the new Prime Minister Mustafa al-Qasemi has taken office. These have gone on for 7 months already, and they show the division of the executive branch. This Sunday, the marches have stopped a little bit because of the coronavirus. Hundreds of manifestors have gathered in the Plaza of Tahrir of Baghdad, and they are in the midst of the crisis. One of the security forces did not let them pass by throwing them bombs of tear gas and sound bombs, while the protesters were burning tires. What they're asking for is better public service and do away with the corruption, as well as holding anticipated elections. Qasemi is taking over the Prime Minister Abdel Mahdi, and he had to leave because of the protests due to corruption. What does Hispan TV say on May 11th? Iraq will continue cooperating with Iran, Russia, and Syria against Daesh. The spokesperson of Iraq has said that the country is using the intelligence in their operations against the extremists of Daesh. This coalition is very important in terms of exchanging information among this group. It's due to this that the security forces of Iraq was able to defeat one of these groups, and in 2017 they declared the victory over them. Nevertheless, the remaining groups of Daesh were kept on active with active cells, which has gone increasing in the recent dates. In fact, the Iraqi forces are accusing the U.S. because of the increase of the Islamic State. What they're saying is that Washington is helping Daesh to perpetrate attacks on Iraq with the purpose of destabilizing the country and justify the illegal presence of the U.S. troops in Iraqi soil. Let's update information with our correspondent, Hisham Wanous from Syria. Hello, colleagues. Greetings. After 5 months of vacancy, the Parliament of Iraq had given the vote of confidence on Saturday, Wednesday this is, to the government that was presented by the Prime Minister that was elected at the beginning of April, Mustafa al-Khami, which, however, there are still 7 offices that are vacant. Mustafa Al-Kazemi thanked the support and said that his cabinet will work to gain the support of the people of Iraq, making clear that this is a government that will give a solution and will not be part of the crisis in terms of the popular protest that began October 1st and that obligated the ousting of the prime minister, the former prime minister. Now this one says that they have a plan for the next year, and he ensures that he is not going to extend the time of transition, so he will hold very healthy elections, and this will be implemented to ensure the sovereignty of the government, such as the Constitution says. In this context, the government will work in the formation of a new electoral law that is going to be more fair and comprehensive, that answers all of the requests of the protesters. This President Al-Kazemi also has other challenges that comes with the pandemic of COVID-19, the collapse of the prices of the oil, corruption, unemployment, insufficiency of public service, the U.S. occupation, and the Islamic State that is having more presence in this country. In this framework, the president says that they will not allow anybody to send aggressions to any other country, making clear that one of his main objectives is to impede that his country is going to be a place where other countries can just fight. He also said that after the first session of his cabinet this past Saturday, he announced his intention to make a committee to negotiate the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from their territory. Meanwhile, with the relationship with Tehran, the prime minister, they promised to improve the cooperation, the bilateral cooperation between two countries in many states, describing that these countries are friends and brothers. Hassan Rouhani, president of Iran, after complimenting the prime minister of Iraq, said that he had hopes that the bilateral relationships that go way back between Iraq and Iran, he hopes that they will find the peace and stability of the region. Of course, this relationship is not making the United States and Israel happy, because they have them on their opposition list. This would make it even harder to go forward with the prime minister's objectives to overcome the situation, both economic, political, social, of his country. This is all we can say from now. We'll be back to studios to Caracas. Thank you very much, Hisham. Let's go to our first pause in Critical Moves. But let's not forget that we have the question of day, and you can participate, giving us your opinion. Let's see what it is. Is Mustafa Al-Kazemi, former intelligence and today Prime Minister of Iraq, who will put an end to the social political crisis of the country? With what cards does he have? Give us your opinion. We'll be right back. Let's continue making a consensus in Critical Moves. When taking office as Prime Minister, Al-Kazemi made an emphasis that his country would make all of the efforts to give a dignified life to all the citizens, and they will work to face the challenge in the economic and health front. This former intelligence director that was designated as prime minister is faced with a country that has complex situation as poverty, corruption. After many months of irregularity, the new prime minister must confront all of the popular protests that are based in reforms. Since October of last year, the protests have not ceased, that are increased because of the conditions of life are always lacking. The crisis of the economy has gone even worse because of the low decrease of the prices in the oil and the coronavirus pandemic that up until now more than 2,700 cases have been confirmed and over 100 people died. In the political front, he must organize parliamentary elections. And internationally, Al-Qasimi must confront the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from his country that was requested by the parliament of his country after al-Soleimani was killed last year. A committee to develop what happened with the investigation in Iraq has increased the terrorist attacks in the country. The conflicts that are caused in the region have made the terrorist group increase the attacks on the government. Let's begin the analysis and our critical moves. We have Mr. Al-Sharaini. He's an international investigator. I want to thank you both for being here in Critical Moves. And I would like to have a profile of this former intelligence officer that has now been sworn in as prime minister ever since May 6th. But what calls my attention is that he still has nice relationship with Iran and, on the other hand, with the United States. The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, manifested his good feelings with this new designation. Good afternoon from here from Valencia. How are you? Well, let's see. The election of the prime minister that was a former CIA director of Iraq, which has now just named as a general that's going to be leading the anti-terrorist missions. We hope that he is able to stop the conflict in Iraq. Let me explain myself. After the attack on Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani, the Iraqi parliament has joined to ask for the ousting of the U.S. troops. And after that, we see that Daesh is on the border between Syria, that is held by the Kurds in the northeast of Syria, so that is an instrument, a force instrument that they can use. In fact, Daesh has been able to mobilize many troops. Like in the center of Iraq, they are practically prepared with weapons. They have all of the equipment and people. This is speaking of 2007, these attacks against Daesh that they now appear in the Iraqi settings. I think that what's going on with the new government will not give any stability to Iraq. With this way of giving a neutral balance between Iran and the United States will soon break. Thank you very much, Firam. Wadi, based on what the Prime Minister has mentioned as the strategic lines of his government, I ask you, which one do you think is going to be the hardest one to go through with? Good morning, Ray. Well, I think Al-Qasimi does not have time to stretch anything in time. These are things, these are urgent topics. Fundamentally, the economic part, the presence of North American troops in the country, and this war, that this covert civil war that has gone on from the ending of the U.S. invasion. So the thing is time. And this art of governing, Iraq has profound wounds of the U.S. war that they have not been able to make up for. The country is semi-destroyed, not only materially, but in the social aspect. This country is full of vengeance to go through with. The presence of Daesh, as you will, as my colleague said, this makes the time is very scarce. And beyond their goodwill, I don't think that there's much possibility. Thank you, Wadi. To continue with this line, the expectation that could be seen in the upcoming future, there is going to be a new round of negotiations between the United States and Iraq regarding the withdrawal of the U.S. troops in this territory. Let's not forget that short after having assassinated Hassan Soleimani, the Iraqi parliament sent a clear statement saying that the U.S. troops have to leave. This was January. Now it's May. What are the expectations of this, about the success of the June conversations? Well, it's going to be a total failure, I can guarantee you. United States will not leave the United States on good terms. Let's not forget that the route of the Silk has to go all the way to the Mediterranean. And when there is peace in Iraq, they were not able to do it. When the U.S. troops went into Iraq with the acceptance of Iraq, and the C8 forces destroyed the government and the state of Saddam Hussein. But both inside the Shiite groups, many people support the United States, and they promote disturbances where there are more Shiites, just to pressure the Iraqi parliament and their government to attack them. So they're not going to leave from that, just to pressure the Iraqi parliament and their government to attack them. So they're not going to leave from that area. So it's basically a way to do it on good terms. However, this will not be possible. The United States don't want that the Syrian war is come to an end, or that this country comes out successful. So both in Iraq and in Syria, religion is very important. People who study much for society, and they know exactly what they want. Iraq has never been a clean state. A parliament divided by Sunnites and Shiites and other groups. So the Shiites are in favor of the United States. And this is not going to end. So unfortunately, Daesh is they are keeping a reservoir on the borderlines. Let's not forget that also the Syrian desert doesn't have the possibility to go and confront them. So not even drones are even to be there. So Daesh will use all of this until they need them, and when things are a bit more calm, then the parliament will be used again. Bearing in mind this influence of you speak of the United States over the government of Iraq, we could expect that the good relations that the Prime Minister holds with neighboring Iran will not lose long. Of course, I totally agree with you. This is like a truce between the war. So it was necessary to put a new government. And of course, let's not forget that this man is pro-United States. So this will be shown in the upcoming conversations. Because I will not forget when they assassinated Soleimani, you see how they all cooperate to see what this man is about. So we are talking about a country that is complicated, complex, where there will be no truce or calm for a long time. Thank you very much, Firas. Wadi, another topic that we would like to talk about is how the social protests have come about once again after this new president was assigned. Who could be behind these social protests? Allegedly, it's already in the streets of Baghdad because of the coronavirus pandemic. But who can be behind these manifestations? I think any international party, for example, United States and Israel, but I don't think they have to work that much to get it. The moods the stakes are high, and so are the moods. This was an agreement between the leaders. And what they want to do is install this new government. And let's not forget the economic crisis and corruption. All of this is an everyday issue. Well, with the eyes placed on pandemic COVID-19, which has not hit so hard in Iraq, but it's a matter of weeks and months. So everything is disposed. So these protests be kept, may be kept pressed aside. Things would be easier if they had a better communication system. So now what they're doing is they're taking to the streets to place their protests. Firas, there was a couple of numbers that I would like to review. This with the purpose of being able to go further in the government of and on the other hand, they have Iran and Iraq with the United States in the middle. Short after the Iraqi congressmen had agreed on their position, they said that the United States would lift the sanctions for 120 days that would ensure them to be able to import things that they need. On the other hand, we read in the same article that from the beginning of this week, a political commission arrived to Baghdad to tell the Shiites to the support of the. So each of the parties are doing what they can. But based on what you just explained, there is more possibilities for the United States to put the authorities of Iran in their pockets and just leave. What do you think? So let's not forget that part of this is done because of the Shiites in Iraq. And basically the religious elite, they're just waiting to see the reactions. But of course, what can happen is that it just might be a truce before the tempest. This will not end because there is a direct confrontation between Iraq and the United States. Syria, same thing. And it's a truce at the moment that will not last. The protests that my colleague spoke of, there are many social and economic problems. And this, crossed with the pandemic of COVID-19, has been a perfect storm. And apart from this, we have the Daesh. That to give an offensive Daesh, they might think that the United States is still attractive. But we will see how in the upcoming days there will not be so many attacks. The Iraqi are waiting to see what the Americans say. And they have these people are going to be very relaxed. So thank you. I want to thank both my guests for participating. Let's go to another pause. Remember that you can participate with us through the question of the day. This is Mustafa Kadhimi, the former intelligence and now Prime Minister of Iraq, who will put an end to the social political crisis of this Arab country. What is at stake? Is he a friend of the United States and Iraq? Give us your opinion. We'll be right back. As one of my guests said, with huge reserves of hydrocarbons, Iraq is a strategic place for the Western countries that are interested in completing and exploiting these natural resources in the Middle East. The oil reserves of Iraq is 112 billion barrels. This is why the great Western powers have their eyes placed on this country. Experts agree that the United States, with the 2003 invasion, took into for their own the energy supplies without carrying all of the debts. Another reason for that war was to have a government that would respond to the U.S. interests and not to let them go with China and Russia. In 2007, there was a march of a law of the hydrocarbons, and that all of the production and the income would go to the United States. The tensions between Iran and Iraq after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani has made things even worse. Now, this sentiment, the anti-American sentiment, has brought them together, along with the coercive measures against Iran, also have repercussion on Iraqi companies, but to which the cost of not doing business with Iran would be very expensive. Among Iran and Iraq, there is a link because they're neighboring countries. The exportation of both countries between March and November was over $1 billion, which would be an increase of 45%. Washington has threatened of suspending the help that they're giving to Iraq if the country doesn't go forth with the sanctions to Iran. They have also threatened that they will not buy their oil. Let's continue with our analysis. We have another analyst who's an expert from Middle Eastern affairs from Chile. Hi, Ray. It's so nice to see you. Greetings to the people of Telesur. Today what we're analyzing is Iraq. based on this new government, a government that we could say is led by a person that is sui generis, because he's a friend of two enemies that are confronted, Iran and the United States. How can we understand this geopolitical strategy? Ray. In Iraq, there are many things at stake. There are economic factors, political factors, geopolitical factors, military factors, geostrategic factors in regards to the interdependency that exists between one country and the other, and the international contradictions, mainly those that have to do with China, Russia, United States, and this fight that there is between the United States and Europe. All of this is very complex to analyze, but basically in this moment, what the United States is searching for is that on one hand, they want to create and maintain a rebellion within Iraq, have the Sunnites and Shiites divided, so they can have a Sunnite government that is separated from the rest of Iraq, and this Sunnite country would be in the Al-Anbar zone. On the other hand, through the Kurd mercenaries and through Daesh, they can create in the Iraqi Kurdistan a Kurd state. This is like divide Iraq in three blocks. What are the objectives of this division of Iraq in three blocks? The first is that Kurdistan, the Iraqi Kurdistan, where the most reserves of oil lie. This, of course, would allow to give oil to Israel. That is the main accomplice to the United States. All of this gas and petroleum would go to the Palestinian port and then to Europe. What are they trying to do with this? A Kurdish country that will permanently be afraid, and they will work in favor of the United States. This is the double or the third of what they have, the Zionist army. It is important to say that there would be a war there that would impede these countries to work together. This on one hand. The second, this would allow United States to stop the Nord Stream project too. This project is this underwater pipes that would give the European countries going through Germany and going through the rest of Europe with almost 60 billion cubic meters of gas. And adding to the supply that already exists, they could perfectly stop Russia without the European market, which is what United States is trying to do. And of course, they would start a collusion with the Europeans. But here, the American transnational and the European transnational interests are far beyond all this. And the third objective is to get Iran out of the game and stop the possibility of the route of China and have the U.S. participation in 65% of their commerce. What happens inside Iraq with this prime minister has to do a lot with the internal pressures that Saudi Arabia are managing, and by this religious similarity and their neighboring with the Sunnites, which is the internal contradiction and of course this is a religious topic and not an economic or cultural or social topic. This is what's going on in Iraq. On the other hand, the popular forces of another man who has Sunnites and Shiites elements and also Christians, and they participate against the United States, are those who serve as a shield, those who have avoided this permanent fractioning of Iraq. And in third place, in the internal aspect, the political forces, let's say that, not the religious forces. I'm going to talk about the Communist Party that used to be a very weak party, is now beginning to rise in their prevalence, and they have more insertion in society next to the Islamic forces that are those who beyond religion. They move themselves as a society. In this way, and to a great degree, the North American plan has stopped to divide Iran in three stages. This responds to the fondness of avoiding the civil war, but it doesn't give any certainty nor to the left of Iraq or any of the sectors. Nobody trusts this new government or to their neighbors. So this is a momentaneous situation that will be ended when the occupation troops of the United States leave the Middle East, not only of Iraq, but of the entire Middle East. So, Nicolas, now that the United States, everybody thought that the United States lost everything after the assassin Soleimani, we see that there is like a reorganization in this country with the support that comes from abroad, and that this figure is coming up that of course has a good relationship with Iran, but it has a past that links them to the United States and the United Kingdom. This is the reason why this new prime minister appears and not somebody else. Yes, it was a transaction formula to calm the high spirits. Of course, the United States wants to just win some money because there is a sentencing that the United States will do something else. But of course, what this president is doing is to extending the periods unless the resistance take them out through the military form, which is what I think that will happen there. This first minister, well, after the assassination of Soleimani, the political apparatus of Iraq, beyond the Iraqi people, got together in a single voice, which did not happen in decades. However, we see now what's going on from a governmental point of view. Look, in the Iraqi society, the majority of people are Shiites and Christian. The minority is the Sunnites. So, what they're trying to do is to avoid the civil war. That is what they're trying to do. This transaction is precisely to avoid this war and give the government some time to do a timetable, because this prime minister has said, let's not forget that the occupation, the idea is, and that let's keep up with this person, so they will have to anyway establish a timetable for the ousting of the U.S. troops. I guess that is what the United States is going to avoid doing, and this might lead to a political confrontation that will be supported by Israel, United States, and Saudi Arabia against the 70% of the population. That is what they're trying to get. That is what they're going after. They want to go to the civil war. Far beyond what happens in Iraq, beyond what the Iraqi population wants, is the interest of the huge interest to save the imperialistic principles in the world. This would set aside the commerce of the United States and all of the Persian Gulf and all of the countries around the Persian Gulf. What they're going to say is this is a huge economic loss for the United States. So there is a confrontation between these interests that United States. Let's not forget that the United States supports Israel, which is the head of the snake. But beyond this, the United States is trying to eliminate as a force, eliminate China and Russia as one of the forces. This is not for 5 or 10 years, but to the far future. And from what I understand, the U.S. imperialism is already showing that they're in agony. We see it in the Middle East, and we see it with a very similar situation that what they're trying to do in your country, Venezuela, that the United States has also tried to use traitors to the government so they can give a coup d'etat in terms of the interest of the United States. Because if the United States controls the oil of the Gulf, the Iraqi oil, and they could control the Venezuelan oil, United States will control the world and the economic development of the world. So don't you believe that this is just a coincidence and that the United States is thinking of the well-being of the Venezuelan. What we see now is what they're trying to do. If you see this Prime Minister of Iraq, we see how the United States want to impose the Juan Guaidó figure in Venezuela. And they have not doubted for a minute to try to kill the Venezuelan president. And what they're doing is negotiating to change the government in exchange of turning in the oil. Thank you very much, Nicolás, for these reflections for Critical Move. See you next time. Thank you, Ray. Stay safe. Let's go to our conclusions. What does the press say? Great challenges does the Prime Minister of Iraq have. From now on, everything he does will not only have an influence on his country, but the rest of the region. What the country is confronting is terrorism, poverty, and corruption. The priorities this country has will be supported by other nations, but beyond the borders, they have to deal with two tension countries, which is the United States and Iran. This might be what guarantees the diplomatic success. Where does the balance turn? On side of justice, or to just give in everything to the Western countries? This is all for today. Thank you very much.